Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We have a very exciting guest today. But before I get to him, I'm going to say hello to my partner, Jamie. I will turn it over to her and let her tell a little bit about the unveiling of who we have with us today. Hi, Jamie. How's it going?
Hi, good to see you. Good to be here. I'm very glad to be here with Mike Collins. Uh, Mike and our paths have crossed in the past as part of a summit he runs, and so we'll dive into all of that. But it's lovely to see you again today, Mike. Mike is a sugar detox expert, and he has been sugar-free for over 30 years. He is the past chairman of the board and current member on the board of the Food Addiction Institute, which is a nonprofit that helps raise awareness about processed foods and sugar worldwide. Mike is also the founder of sugaraddiction.com, which has been helping thousands successfully quit sugar for over 9 years. Michael and his wife raised two children sugar-free from the womb to 6 years of age. And Mike has worked closely with others to help them regain their lives ravaged by various substance use disorders, which I'm just fascinated with hearing about all the connections there, Mike.
Yeah.
Uh, Mike has also dedicated his life to helping people get off the high inflammatory sugary diets and regaining their life and health. So, Mike, it's an honor to have you with us today. Thank you again for your time and commitment here. Paige, I'll turn it over to you.
Y- Yes, we are just waiting to dive into the good stuff in here.
Dive in, dive in.
First of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about your recovery story, what that looked like for you, what got you from, where you had this dependence on sugar? Sugar is my main drug of choice too. I don't know if that was yours or all processed foods, but how that looks coming from where that was to where you're in this chair today. What were those pivotal moments like in your recovery journey?
Yeah, I always start this generation back. Really, my mother was my favorite sugar junkie and
Right.
gained 60 pounds on a 105-pound frame when she had me. And basically, when I interviewed her, she said that's all she ate was sugar. And so I really came by it honestly. But before that, her mom had died when she was only 8, and they had to move in with my great aunt, and my grandfather made a deal with his cousin Jim. They owned the country store across the way, right? He said anytime my mother walked into that store, she could have as much any kind of candy she wanted, just put it on his tab. Now that was a wonderful thing to do for an 8-year-old who just lost her mother, but it really cemented in my mother, and I believe she died of sugar addiction. I don't believe she died of Alzheimer's. But
Wow.
when she died, I do believe, and this is how I grew up, that sugar is love. And
Sure.
we were covered up with sugar. I mean, the stories are legendary. Just like Eric Clapton says in one of his videos, bread and butter and sugar sandwiches we had, Kool-Aid with 3 times the recipe. I mean, my mother had a stash. We knew where it was, and there were no restrictions at all. Like we could put as much sugar on the cornflakes and Cheerios as we wanted and scrape a half an inch of sugar off at the bottom.
Oh,
No
yeah.
problem. I have that sugar bowl from the estate. There has, she never said no. It wasn't, she only said no when she ran out of her own stash. So
Mhm.
anyway, fast forward, that's how I grew up. I ran into beer at 14 or 15, and I knew that beer changed my state. This is going to be central to the entirety of the conversation, I hope, is that I did not realize, and I don't think anyone, and very few people in this society, except people in food addiction recovery, realize that they are changing and numbing and feeling differently when they ingest sugar and ultra processed carbohydrates. This is a brain illness, right? So my party with beer and booze and drugs and alcohol lasted till I was about 28 and I got sober. Now, what happened was I didn't pick up sugar. I went back to sugar. Okay. Mountain Dews, highest caffeinated beverage on the market, all kind of I didn't eat any real food, pasta, pizza, ultra processed carbohydrates. And I started studying, just getting healthy, really. Just I was sober and young and I wanted to get healthy. And I ran across a book called Sugar Blues, written by William Duffy, right? Sugar Blues, he eventually married Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star, right? And they promoted that book pretty heavily in the late 70s and early 80s. And so anyway, I went on to have a regular career. The one thing that I did stress, as you mentioned in the intro, is that somehow I met a woman in recovery from alcohol and drugs who I talked into not having sugar, flour, or caffeine. Well, no, actually, she had flour. We had flour, sugar or caffeine in the womb, or until we made it till they were 6 years old, right?
Mhm.
And we fought the grandparents, we fought
Yeah,
the
no small feat.
school. They all freaking thought we were nuts. They literally said stuff like, and over that we were depriving them of a childhood. And if I were to tell you the stories of my children and their brain, you'd think I was lying. You'd think that their successes in life, their standardized test scores, their college, and their careers currently, you'd think that it was just some fabrication of a bragging dad. But I believe in my heart that their brain developed, better. I mean, this is now proven out scientifically.
Mhm.
Anyway, again, fast forward about 2009. It's been a while. I think that might be 2010. I bought sugaraddiction.com and I started giving out the best information on the planet, literally. I mean, but nothing happened. Like people, few people would, write me or whatever. But it wasn't until I was kind of semi-retired and I started coaching people and starting little groups on Facebook and what have you, that it really took off. And then when the pandemic hit, forget about it, just went on steroids and everybody was into it for some reason. And that's how I ended up here. We started doing the summit 2015 or 16, and we've talked to 400 of the world's leading experts.
Wow.
We're involved in the work groups to get sugar addiction, which will probably likely be called ultra processed food use disorder, into the ICD-10 and the DSM. So
DSM.
it's been a long ride, but that's the short podcast version. I can answer it. It usually brings up more questions.
Well, I know the way you tell the story, it seems like it was kind of a seamless journey for you.
Yeah, right.
Certainly,
No,
there
not
had to be some bumps along the way. So,
Oh,
do you want to share about maybe something that was your biggest struggle or challenge and how you overcame those?
personally or professionally.
I'm going to let you choose, but most of the people listening want to know about processed food use. So,
Yeah, no, look, I audited, I guess the best way to put it. I took a look at the 12-step stuff, and I was not uh, deeply understanding the relationship to the flour part of it. And then another piece of the puzzle, I was always caffeine free because it gave me anxiety, right? But it didn't become, and that was years ago. I've been caffeine free over 35 years myself, but I used flour for a while, and the kids had a little flour too. And then grains and that kind of stuff. That stuff was it, and a lot of fruit. That stuff eluded me a little bit till just about 5 or 7 years ago. And I paid for that in inflammation, in acne, and in my 50s, for God's sakes. I mean, rosacea. The only thing I didn't want to have was a big red nose like my grandfather, from drinking. And so there was a lot of inflammation. And so I would say that, and this is with everyone, I believe, is the acceptance of some of the things that we take for granted and normal and call food are really drugs. And really now it's becoming very well known that they're powerful drugs. Brain, brain active, like neurotoxins that are affecting dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors. And it's the dose makes the poison. Use a little sugar. I mean, use a little cocaine or use a little alcohol, whatever. But we are pounding 30 plus. That's an average. That's average. Now, if you have any habit at all, it's 40 and 50 teaspoons of sugar a day, right? So yeah, I mean, it was a really bumpy road, and I went through every incarnation that you can think of. I'm not sure you could throw an incarnation of substance or ultra processed food use disorder that I can't answer or can't, or if I haven't done it, thousands of people in my support groups can,
Yeah.
they've been through it and I've been through it with them.
Yeah. One of the things you said that's really stands out to me, because I've got a background myself in 12-step, and not on the substance side, but on the relationship side,
Yeah.
from Al-Anon perspective. And for me, that led me, my Al-Anon recovery led me over to my food recovery.
Good.
So it was so interesting when you mentioned how, and I see it all the time, and I see it when I hear it, right? I hear it from folks that are in recovery from substance or alcohol, and they say, you know what, I'm in recovery and I gained 50 pounds, or I'm in recovery and I gained 100 pounds and I can't stop eating, and they know my history, they know my story, or they've known me long enough to see my story, and they ask me questions
Yep.
about what do you know about this? What do you know about the food? And we talk a little bit about the addiction, the addictive ingredients in food and how our bodies have addictive responses to it, to them. And that just blows their mind. And they look at it as, some have shared that they look at it as sort of an addictive transfer. And I just talk, addiction transfer. And I just talk about it as, I seek comfort from those foods.
Right.
Like you, someone who struggled with alcohol sought comfort from alcohol or drugs. And for me, Paige knows this from hearing me say it more than once, but I could have easily been an alcoholic. But when you're 3 years old, nobody's pouring you a martini.
Right.
I could have easily been an alcoholic.
Sure.
So from my perspective, it's really a fascinating comparison. What 12-step principles have you taken along your journey and applied?
And that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that question. I thought I'd heard them all. Um, that's a good, the old one day at a time, but at the end of the day, I think one of the most important, and it's funny they talk about the relationship program. So one of the most important understandings, deep understandings that needs to happen when you recover from pretty much any addiction, but definitely in the food use disorder stuff, is that once you get detoxed, okay, and detox is real, gang. It hurts. It's painful. There's irritability and lethargy and hunger and headaches and a lot of stuff goes on. Acne and breakouts. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. And once you get to the other side of 30, 60, 90 days, that's the ticket to the game. That's the only way you get in this game, okay, of recovery and change. Then the entire thing shifts to a codependency recovery. And it's not a recovery, like people are under the misunderstanding that codependency is a relationship you have with others. But at the core, it's a relationship you have with yourself, right? And obviously others are involved later or part of it.
They're part of the levers we pull, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's like, and it takes time because look, we are all brainwashed by the diet industry. Eat less, exercise more. They believe, I love that phrase. What is it? Work on your weight and you'll lose your abstinence. Work on your abstinence, you'll lose the weight, kind of thing. It's like, if people understand that they really have to recover from a substance use disorder, it's a substance use disorder recovery, then they can, it's much quicker than, going to the gym and fasting and macros and all that crap, supplements and shakes. And it's so much different, with just abstinence from these drugs. And I guess to even finish this, I think the acceptance part that I learned in 12-step, the acceptance, the idea that, okay, we are here in history. It was an evolutionary wrong turn. The fact that sugar and flour got so deep into our society is going to look scary in about 500 years, probably in 100 years. It's going to look very scary that happened and you used to give that to children, right? But right now, this is where we are. And and I'm not talking out of school. This is scientifically proven at deep, deep levels, and this stuff gets better every day, that, you know, this is a brain illness caused by a drug. And those drugs are as powerful to numb you out, to do what drugs do, which is make you feel a little bit better for a few more minutes, and that's it. You know what I mean? And it's a drug addiction and a drug addiction recovery. So yeah, accepting that's where we are in history. That's where you are in history as a recovering person or a person that wants to change.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I have said to myself in one day, acceptance is the answer to all my problems.
Yeah. Okay.
Whatever it is, what is it, page 417? Is that the page in the big book? But
What would say that statement one more time, Jamie, so I can hear it and everyone can hear it?
acceptance is the answer to all my problems today.
Oh,
If I'm disturbed, I'm the problem.
Right.
It's very, very helpful. And again, we can relate it to the choices we're making, right, are the problem. It could be something as you know, again, not accepting reality, not accepting people, not accepting the situation, not accepting our feelings, 100 different things. So lack of acceptance or resistance causes a lot of our issues and the discomfort. And then we run to, in this case, substances like sugar to alter our state and to use for comfort. And that's where that cycle gets repeated and reinforced.
Yeah.
You said something about your mom, Mike, and I just wanted to circle back to it because I found it so interesting. The link to sugar use in women. I know you've done a lot of research in your career. What have you found about women and sugar use? I know your mom's story, obviously, it's very, very powerful about her connection to sugar and eating or candy and love.
Yeah.
Or, you know, grief and people feeling that grief that she had with this sugar food. But what have you found in your research?
Well, this is not anymore. This is no longer research. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it is, but it's, you know, all of my contemporaries in the business and, you know, 20,000 people on Facebook on a group, 30,000 in a page, all of the clients that we worked with, 20,000 plus detoxes, 95% of them are women. Now, that's just a fact. It's not like and all of my contemporaries say the exact same thing. Their clients are all women. Now, my speculation is that through their entire life, well, I know this is not sexist in any way, but it's the good girls drug. Women drink, or women use sugar and men drink. Okay. And that was my mother and father's case. Okay.
Okay.
But you know, really at the end of the day, my goal has always been to get it down to age or childbearing age women, because I think pregnancy or, sugar in the womb is dangerous and deadly.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
people that get told they're pregnant can stop drinking in that day, even if they have a substance use disorder, or stop smoking that day. Like that day, that hour, they stop. Like they never haven't had a cigarette at least for 9 months, but they can't stop sugar, right? Or they don't anyway, because the knowledge is not there, right? And so I love this phrase, create your vision and play with who shows up. Well, who showed up were women between, I like to say 40 and 80, but it's really 50 and 80. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And what I'm saying is, what I'm believing is, my sense in this is that through all of their life, we're all about the same age, like growing up, they dealt with body issues. They dealt with weight and weight gain. They were they would have an ice cream party with their friends when they broke up with their boyfriend, and the boyfriend would go drinking. You know what I mean? And so this just became a cultural thing and is a cultural thing. And it's going to be a while to unwind, because there's a lot of people on the other side that make an awful lot of money continuing to deliver these products, and make, Coke is life commercials.
But is it also intertwined in Paige? I promise I'll turn it back over to you. I just have this follow-up question on. It's also deeply intertwined with diet culture and the whole idea that women spend most of their lives resisting these foods and then going back and trying to get them.
Yes. No, it's absolutely true. I mean, they're just restriction, eat less, exercise more, is so deeply ingrained in women, men too, but women, that when they get to a whole food program of any kind, that first of all, they think they're eating too much. And they're like, I can't eat that much food. Like, well, that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? But because they've been trying to live on 800 calories for 20 years,
Yeah.
And I don't even believe in calories, by the way, just so you know. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, we will.
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Do you think then these women that are just kind of got a free for all during the pregnancy with the sugar, then that passes on to these babies that are born completely addicted?
110%. Absolutely. I believe their brain was wired in the womb, likely, definitely by the time they're 1 or 2 or 3, when they're, just, it's so cute to give them a little cookie and frosting and all of that, a juice box. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not that smart, and my kids are like rocket scientist smart.
Nice.
Like in my heart, in my soul, and now with the research of George Eady and Chris Baumer, and it goes on and on, their brain just developed better in the womb until they were 6, and the same thing I see all the time, where in front of my eyes on Zoom meetings, I see people, women mostly, but people change. Their face gets thinner. They get more articulate. They start taking on projects they've never taken on in their life. Confidence grows. Their brain is changing. Yes, their body's changing. Of course it's changing, but their brain is changing.
I agree. I agree. You brought up that point about restriction when you and Jamie were just talking about how you don't believe in restriction, but can you expand on that a little bit? When you say restriction, are you just specifically talking about calories, or when it comes to flour and sugar, do we restrict that? Do we modify that? So I just want to make sure that
Okay, so this is an interesting question, in that in the world of eating disorders, okay, the people who run all the treatment centers and who have, and these are largely women, strangely enough, you are not well if in binge eating or bulimia if you cannot ingest some flour and sugar. Okay, this is an absolute misnomer. It's wrong, and it's not. It's about to be changed. There's work groups for the ICD-10 who believe in food addiction. There's Ashley Gerhardt of the University of Michigan, who's working on the DSM. I mean, sugar addiction is real, okay? And it's a real problem. And this idea that it can be that you can have a little is just not true. For 1/3 of the population biochemically cannot ingest sugar without setting up cravings for massive amounts of more sugar.
I think it's low. I think that 1/3 is low.
So yeah, I mean, it's
and the other 2/3?
well, we have harmful users of about 1/3. Harmful users are people who, because the food system has 85% of its products sugar, with a reset, with a little clarity, a little bit of abstinence, they may be able to go back to part-time use of sugar. And then there's the third that's like we all hate. No, just kidding. That they just leave it and walk away from it. They don't care, right? Like your friend who can have half a glass of wine and walk away. But those numbers track with the obesity numbers, by the way. 1/3 obese, 1/3 overweight, and a third quote unquote normal, right? But now I want to quantify this. Is like you can be a very thin sugar addict, very thin sugar addict.
Yes.
Necessarily need. I got a coach that's an ultra marathoner. Like, she carried 15 pounds running, I don't know, 100 some odd miles a week, and she couldn't get those last 15 pounds off, right? They're gone now, and her times are down, but it didn't have anything to do with her exercise or her restriction or anything like that. It was a chemical reaction in her body.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about this term that you use is use disorder around foods, or sugar use disorder, or processed food use disorder.
Right.
Just to make sure that all our listeners know, the term that you're moving towards is ultra processed food use disorder. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So how has your approach and perception of the term food addiction changed? Do you think that it exists, or are you moving away from that terminology? And if so, why?
Now, this is a great question. I'll send you guys the working paper for the ICD-10, just to remind me. And at the end of the day, the reason they used the term addiction when they applied for the ICD-10, which is the World Health, kind of same as the DSM, but when they applied for that, all of the research said sugar addiction. Okay, so they had to use sightings from addiction, from addiction research, right? And you can check this, it's very simple to check out. In the United States, all of the government websites have been scrubbed for the terms addiction, addict, junkie, all these things are gone. Like the N-word, are considered stigmatized. The largest nonprofits in the world, Paces and Voices in Recovery, K Street, Washington, D.C., that's not on their website anymore. And I don't want to stand on political correctness because, I'm an addict. I'll probably, I'm an addict and addiction. Hell, I own sugaraddiction.com, for God's sake. I understand it, but I'm not going to fight. There's no way it's getting in the DSM under the term addiction. Never going to happen. It's not going to happen. They don't use the word anymore, period.
Yeah.
So that's the only, it's a small nuance, but it's real.
Absolutely. And this is a topic that Paige and I have talked about a lot. We believe that when we built our whole structure for real food recovery, it's easy, it's relatable to say, we're two lifelong processed food addicts. And in the last few months, I've told Paige I'd like personally to move away from that addict terminology, just because for me, it feels very negative, and I'm in no position to judge others or to label another human being. So I really would like to move away from that term addiction. Now, I do believe that I have addictive responses in my body to foods with certain, connections or collaborations of chemicals. And I absolutely believe that I have a response to the addictive properties of certain foods. And if I used drugs or alcohol, I'm sure I would have the same kind of response. So I think it is just a little tweak of the vernacular, a little tweak of the verbiage. And I think it's really important because it does remove shame. But for others, Paige included, it evokes a feeling of freedom to know that it's not them, that they're not broken or wrong, that they're not, these shameful people that can't figure out how to, stop eating a piece of cake. It's, it actually, to know that it's an addiction gives them a lot of freedom. So this term disorder, I understand is prevalent throughout the DSM for different diagnoses as well as ICD. How does one define disorder?
Well, I might be a touch out of my depth on that one, but at the end of the day, it's the same as addiction, right? It's tolerance, it's adverse consequences when you keep using after adverse consequences and blah blah blah, keeps going. There's a whole list, and it's currently, all you gotta do is look it up. It's still under addiction for 90% of even Dr. Google, you know what I mean? But this is a real evolutionary moment, if you will, in time, in history, where we are trying to get this to the point where people can claim it on their insurance, and
Right.
doctors can bill it, and these kinds of things.
Beautiful.
And so we just have to, again, it's the evolution of the lexicon of the destigmatization. It's not necessarily, there's no real difference in a use disorder and an addiction. They're the same. It's like, it's the same thing, but it's just like,
I hear you.
I don't want to say semantics because it isn't semantics. I agree wholeheartedly with it. But we have to play with what we're given, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
I do love that term, ultra processed use disorder. It's just a mouthful to say.
It is. UpFud, I've come up with the acronym UpFud. Ultra processed food used to.
Upfud.
It's like it's like what's the fructose malabsorption is fructmal or something, and whatever. They got different names for all this stuff.
So we've agreed that whether we call it a disorder or an addiction, when you pull back the layers of the onion, it's still the same
Still the same.
animal, right?
It's the
And
same
so
animal, same animal.
And so what that says to me is no matter what we call it, that means the treatment is the same. How we approach it is the same. Where we start is the same. So
Yep.
for those that are listening, do you have advice as where would someone, you've kind of identified in there what, if you want to find out if you fall in that category, you said a couple of things about you continue on in spite of consequences, and I can't remember the other thing that you
Build
just,
up tolerance,
yeah,
you know,
it's very progressive. We know that.
very
So
progressive.
for those that are suffering, do you have a place that you recommend they start? Where do they start this journey? Because it can be so overwhelming and your head is spinning. Where would I even start?
No, that's a good question. So, over the 20,000+ detoxes we've done and the maturity of whatever percentage goes on to maintenance, we have found that some of the things that you see on the internet in different programs and largely all 12-step programs, is that weighing and measuring is part of it. Well, we found that 80% of people don't need to weigh and measure if they would commit to no flour, no sugar, no caffeine. Now, caffeine was added 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I worked with an Olympian. It's a long story. I can tell it if you want, but she couldn't get off the sugar. She could do anything with her body. But by this time, she was a chiropractor and had kids, and she started to see her kids. And when we got her off, well, I'll just tell the story. So they were giving her coffee at 10 years of age for performance in the pool. Okay. And, she won a bronze medal. She's the real deal. She could do anything. And it wasn't a weight thing. She didn't have a weight problem. She was still swimming. But when she finally got off the caffeine, the sugar fell right behind it because it was wired together, fired together, like chocolate and tea and coffee, right?
Sure.
Like the same stuff was being hit in the brain. And we found that when I implemented it, 4 or 5 years ago, it just took off. You know what I mean? People started having better, faster success, less relapses, the whole thing. Because now we know why, okay? Because the brain science is very clear. It's the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. And when I use dopamine, I mean all of those, okay? Because dopamine's kind of popular now. People get that word.
Right.
But this brain science kind of stuff came along, and the study of fructose has come along as well, come a huge amount. Dr. Johnson's, got a grant from the NIS that, is it the NIS? I don't know. He's got a grant that says if he can block the fructose pathway, he can stop alcoholism. He can cure alcoholism. And so all of these things are intertwined in the brain, right? And Nora Volkow has been saying this for years, the chairman of the government, whatever it is, that she's like the czar, the drug czar of the country. And it's a brain illness. And if you can maintain an abstinence of flour, sugar, and caffeine, then you can walk out of this thing. But I'm telling you, the average person, when they try that little act, the first 5 to 7 days, if they have any habit at all, they're incapacitated. And they turn back through a self-medication process. The thing I study the most is denial and cravings. Denial and cravings, right? This interplay between denial and cravings, right? So you get to day 7, you lose 3 pounds, you felt crap and somehow your limbic brain, which needs a dopamine shot, you're not looking for a sweet taste on your mouth, you're looking for a dopamine hit in your body. And the brain can somehow convert this, your lizard brain can convert to your frontal cortex this rationalization that, you need to go out in the snow and get some Ben and Jerry's at the 7-Eleven. Like it somehow can make that conversion, right? I don't know how it happens, right? And then along with that, you can deny that it's a problem. You say, I got this handled. I've been a week off of all of it, right? And so you've got this blend of cravings and denial that is like, you need someone like yourselves who've been there, that they can pick up the phone and call, get on a Zoom call. They've got to have a guide, because otherwise, left to their own devices, left to their own brain chemistry, their own body chemistry, their own history, they will fall back. They will rationalize it some way or the other. We have a group of foods called borderline foods: nuts and nut butters, dairy, grains, and fruit juices. Okay, 4 groups. And people always rationalize, they start binging on cashews, all of a sudden they're into the sugar. Same thing, they start drinking juices or eating a lot of bananas, and they back into the sugar. You know what I mean? Because the fructose is ascending in scientific literature and scientific understanding as something that it's half of the table sugar molecule, right? Fructose and glucose. And they're starting to understand now that large amounts of fructose from nuts or fruit or whatever can be just as dangerous, or, can set up the cravings, that limbic brain to the frontal cortex kind of cravings, as regular sugar. It's fructose. The molecule's the same. There's no difference. Like, it's not a different molecule. So, and I get a little pushback on that with the fruit and stuff, but it's very real, very real.
You kind of already answered one of the things that I wanted to bring up about support. And when we interviewed Vera Tarman, she said the number one thing for success is you've got to have support. You can't do it on your own. If you could, you would have by now. So that eliminates that question of, it sounds like you are very pro support. But what I was going to really ask you is, what separates the people that are successful versus the ones that are not successful? I mean, that people can go one of 2 ways at that 7-day mark, because people are enthusiastic that first week. They're
Right.
they're in it. And then something changes after that first week, and it's not new and exciting. The
First
penny isn't
30 days, we see
Yeah.
it. We see it first 30 days.
Oh,
We
yeah,
see
they can
it-
last a while.
Yeah,
They can muscle it for a while.
we can see
Build
folks go
willpower
up.
for a while, because they're probably losing a few pounds a week. I
right.
love Vera. Vera and I are good friends, and I agree with her 100%. It really is the support. I mean, and you had another nuance to that question. What was it? I missed it.
Well, just what separates the 2 groups?
Oh, what separates? Yeah, what
Yeah.
separates? So what separates them, I think, is to have someone, in colloquial terms, someone's got their back. Someone that they believe has done this before and lost. Look, 80-90% of the people, maybe more, come to us for weight loss. Okay, that's
Sure,
their
of course.
first goal.
Of
And so you
course.
have to meet them where they are, right? And if it's, like, I never really had major weight issues, and it was a while before I got enough coaches who were, that a lot of them were in recovery already. They'd quit drinking, quit doing drugs, but they couldn't stop using sugar. But, till the weight loss people came around, and then they had people that they could look to who had lost weight, and that keeps them going for 30 or 60 days. By that time, then they start to really get into the addiction piece of the puzzle, the codependency piece of the puzzle. So the separation, I think, is having that group, that person, that group of people who have, and where it's cool to be sugar, flour, and caffeine free, where it's a cool, like, this is the place I hang out with. This is, I'm hip here. I got 45 days and everybody's going rah, rah, You quit drinking, they're like, yeah. You quit smoking, good job. You quit using sugar, they're like,
Nobody likes that. Nobody in your friend group likes that.
like the whole meal turns to your meal, and the whole, like, then you went there to discuss business, or somebody died or something, and they're all talking about your food.
Yeah. So in the last few minutes we have, I want to dive into a topic that is I would say, all the rage in the media.
All the
So
rage.
what are your takes and feelings on these GLP-1 drugs that are out there?
I knew this was coming.
How have what are your thoughts on them? Let's start there.
Well, here's the thing. You guys know who Russell Brand is?
Yes, very well.
Russell's talking about people talking about microdosing LSD and this kind of the other stuff.
Mhm.
And he says, that's all well and good, but I don't think I'll try that. It's like, I probably could use some trauma help, but I'm not going to try that. And I feel the same way, like when I was in college, it was speed, and that never stopped all the way to Vyvanse and binge eating, you know what I mean? And Vyvanse got okayed for binge eating and stuff. So the speed never went away.
No,
In
phentermine.
fact, they gave my mother speed when she was pregnant with me.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah. I was the only
Steroids
one in
and
my family
ivermectin?
attracted to cocaine. Imagine that. Anyway, enough of that. The GLP-1s, I believe, are headed for a crash. You know what I mean? I just, there's going to be fallout. It's going to be fen-phen, I think. This is the first podcast I've actually voiced my opinion, like the first time it's ever been recorded publicly. And so I guess I got to stick with it at the end of the day. But I don't believe in, I think in 100 years, we're going to call this time period the guinea pig era. And that means like there's going to be a few things that will come out the other side where you can do Dr. Spock kind of thing and Star Trek kind of stuff. And that's great. But we will have been the guinea pigs for that 150 or 200 years, including big food and big pharma. Okay,
Yes.
both of them. And so the already existing side effects are just ridiculous, really. And who would
They're
risk
frightening.
it?
They're frightening.
It's kind of like, you know how many bariatric patients I got who just hacked a cut up stomach?
Barbaric surgeries, absolutely.
You know,
Barbaric.
they like learned how to drink. They became alcoholics. They learned how to like drink the sodas and still never lose the weight or lose the weight and gain it back.
Mhm.
And then finally, even with a smaller stomach, they went abstinent sugar and flour, and they finally got the relief they need. There's a great book and a great podcast by Jonathan Harry, who actually took the product.
Oh, Johan Harry.
Johan Harry, and very measured, pragmatic look at both sides of the story. So you guys should check that out, or you folks can check that out.
I listened to a couple of his interviews around his GLP-1 experience, and here was this man, right, Johan Hari, for his huge multi-million listens and views of this TED talk all around how addiction is a disease of connection.
Correct.
Not substance per se, and the great quote page, right? The antidote for addiction is connection.
Yes, I love that.
And so Johan Hari has this huge following. I really wonder if he was paid by Big Pharma to shill.
Well, yeah, again, but he throws the negatives out there.
He does, and it's interesting because I heard his interview with Rich Roll or watched it, and he talks a lot about how he still he goes to his old food behaviors. Yeah. He just eats less of these food behaviors, and the interviewer's point was, you've been given this, his words, you've been given this key to the kingdom, right? You've been given this tool, right? This tool that could help you change your behaviors, and you find yourself in those old behaviors that got you where you are. Right. Is this a responsible use of the tool? So I love that he's talking about both sides. And I think that's what we're seeing across the board with these GLP-1s. They're tools, and because prescribing physicians or clinicians are not giving, they're just giving the tool without any of the directions on how to utilize the tool. You have folks that are like, well, I just ate half a piece of cake, or I just had, my half a can of Mountain Dew or whatever, and I'm losing weight, and then of course they're setting themselves up huge, relapse, right? Metabolically speaking, because they're losing all their lean mass. So, Paige and I have strong feelings, right, about the GLP-1s, but mine are not about the drugs per se. It's about how the drugs are administered, how they're used, and these influencers on the interwebs saying, how they're losing 30 pounds in 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is. And then the interviewer will ask them, well, what are you eating? And they're like, well, I had a bite of this and a piece of that and three chocolate chips and it's all junk. It's all crap. And then they'll say, well, I threw up so hard in my very first time taking this dose that I passed out. And I'm like, like,
But you look good going down.
what's going on? Like, does no one see the issue? And they're like, but now I'm in my size 4s. Like, none of that makes any sense to me. None of it makes any sense to me. I don't understand how these doctors cannot ask these questions about big pharma. Why no one is tying it to the dosing? Why no one is tying these side effects to the dosing? And how could these drugs be used responsibly to help the people who really can use this as a tool and prioritize lean proteins, vegetables, and a healthy lifestyle to go along with these drugs to get them to a place where they can truly start to heal things and look at those reactions to addictive
And maintain their muscle mass.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's the worst, scariest part. Like
Yeah.
all-cause mortality, like people die if they lose their muscle mass when they get old.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just wanted to know what your thought was about them. And I don't know if it's the poison is in the dose. Speaking of what you said earlier, I absolutely I think that the poison is in the dose with these GLP-1s. And I also think that that the way that they're administered and the tools that people are using them in the wrong way. And I do think that it will result in this whole big, huge experiment that will come crashing down for so many of these GLP-1 users hard in the next 5 years.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't go there, but I mean, there's a lot of people with vaccine injuries as well, and it's like, okay, so it might work for some people, but for the most part, we can't make that change in the anatomy that quickly evolutionarily, and it's just not going to work out. I mean, we already did it in 40 or 50, 30 or 40 years with the obesity and the gain, like going up in weight and, going up in metabolic problems. The idea that we can reverse it by chemicals and go the other direction is foolhardy. I think it's just.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's teasing a promise that most people can't fulfill, right? Themselves. Absolutely. So, Mike, where can we find you and find out more about your work?
Yeah, sugaraddiction.com. It's pretty simple. Like I already own sugar use disorder, but
okay.
And so but it's not, obviously up yet, but I do believe that it will change that. But, I'm at sugaraddiction.com. We've got a free book. The Quit Sugar Summit comes off every year. We have it's our 12th event in January. And we actually have a binge eating one coming up. So if they get on my email list, they'll find out about that. And it's our first foray into one that is already in the DSM, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's an interesting kind of a, twist to our stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I'm out there. I'm the original, I'm sugar-free man. You can find me pretty much anywhere.
Yes, the real sugar-free man on social media. Is that right?
All the socials and yeah.
Great.
Or whatever.
And is it the first binge eating summit?
Yeah, it's the first one. I've owned Binge Eating Summit for a long time. We just never got to it. And I actually used to own bingeeating.com and sold it to a treatment center. They gave me an offer I could refuse. But it's a lot of our folks come in as binge eaters. And again, the same thing applies. Once they get into addiction recovery and are no longer ingesting the drug, of 10 or 15% of them are volume eaters. In other words, they hack their biology by stretching their stomach out day in and day in, day out and day in, or whatever. And even without sugar and flour, but those are pretty rare. folks.
I hear you. I hear you. I can identify there.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you deeply for your time and for your thoughtful
Yeah.
conversation today. Paige, anything you want to add before we close?
No, this has just been a wonderful, very interesting conversation, and I have enjoyed it immensely, and hopefully we can have you back sometime.
I would love that. I really would. I think it'd be awesome. And you guys are doing great things out there, really. Just keep up the good work. The more people we get out there, the faster the general public understand that it's not eat less and exercise more, that there's a second step to this, So keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you want to find more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care.